Alrighty then, welcome back to episode 10 of the BALLBAG podcast. Today, not one but two co-hosts as we jump into the NFC West. Welcome back to the BALLBAG as we talk about all things football once again. And to my right, we have Thomas the Tank Engine, Tom Ugodi. Tom, tell the people.
You keep just throwing in different adjectives.
New nicknames every week. Get ready.
You got your thesaurus out, and I guess I can respect that. Double digits, just double digits, and for our double-digit episode, our premier double-digit episode, we brought in a big one. We brought in a guy that you're all going to want to go follow, especially fans out on the West Coast, because from what I've been told, this guy's got some big time insight into the National Football League out there in San Francisco. Peter, why don't you introduce our guest today?
Our guest today hails from the West Coast of the United States of America, covering the team. I guess our biggest, most pain in the butt rival down there in San Francisco. Kyle, welcome to the show, man. Welcome to the BALLBAG.
Yeah, thanks. Is it really a rivalry, though? Like, the Seahawks just kicked the shit out of the Niners for so long that it didn't feel rivalry-ish there for a while.
Well, he said it, not really a rival, not even a speck on the interest board for Seattle fans. But.
No, don't. What happened last year in the playoffs? Okay, you guys listen.
Yeah, no,
right?
going 0-3 in a season's tough.
That is tough, man. All right, Gino's doing the best he can, but it is what it is. The Niners have a storied history. I think that's something that can't be overlooked.
Mm-hmm.
That being said, the Seahawks won more recently, so
that's recency bias for sure.
That's honestly on the whole championships and arguing it, regardless of the sport. That's where I always land. Like, who won more recently, man? That's what
Niners got there. They got there more recently,
twice.
Yeah. Didn't work out, but.
But before we truly jump in, Kyle, why don't you go ahead and plug everything that you're doing, products you're working on, where people can find you, and that's your plugs.
I'm on Twitter at KyleAMadson. I'm on Threads, the Instagram one. I don't even know what my username is on that. I think it's MadSports8, which is my Instagram handle. So that's there. I don't really use it though, but that's the thing that I do.
Does.
Yeah, NinersWire.com is where I write stuff, and then I do a podcast, Candlestick Chronicles, with Chris Biederman, who works for the Sacramento Bee. So that's the various stuff I'm doing right now.
I gotta say, the name Candlestick Chronicles, it rolls off the tongue. I like it. That's a
it really does.
name.
So when it first got pitched to me, because the podcast was supposed to be just Chris, my co-host. So we work for the Blue Wire Podcast Network, and when Blue Wire wanted to do a Niners pod, they hit Chris, who's a beat writer for the team, and they were like, "Hey, do you want to do this pod?" And he's like, "Yeah, sure, but I can't do it by myself. I'm boring." And you know what? Good self-awareness. And so
it's not a shot. It's not a shot.
He's the homie. I love Chris to death. He was in my wedding. I love the guy. But we end up doing this pod, and he tells me, "Hey, I'm doing a podcast called Candlestick Chronicles." And I was like, "Well, I hate that, but I'm in." But now I really like it. We have a partnership with a brewery in Santa Rosa, which is a city in the North Bay. It's called Cooperage Brewing. They brew a beer called Candlestick Chronicles every year right around football season. They did like 3 runs of it last year, so we've got year 3 coming up. And the can's really sick. It's got like our podcast little logo on it and our names and stuff. It's pretty sick. So yeah,
that is sick. We're gonna have to get our hands on a 6-pack of that, Pete. We're gonna have to figure out how to get that.
I'll be done with
that. We usually get a bunch of it from the brewery, so I'll figure that out with you guys.
Oh hell yeah!
That'd be really
cool. I don't know what the laws are for shipping beer, but we're sure gonna try.
I don't think Georgia might care. I haven't decided.
Nah.
On
If it was
Sundays,
Alabama,
but maybe Monday through Saturday. Okay.
I bought beer today. As long as it's after 11:30, they don't care. You just have to save the morning for Jesus. That's why. Yeah. So
indeed,
that's what football.
Oh baby,
I'm very excited, man. Are you a college football fan, Kyle?
I'm a college football fan. in the sense that I'll watch it and I follow it. I don't have a favorite team.
Got it.
I typically pick people I don't want to win,
Mm,
and that's kind of where my heart lies, is being a
okay.
hater. Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Like
Wow.
honestly, I don't know where, and I know that if you guys are big college football fans and I know that the fan bases are passionate, and I don't have anything against anybody, but like I'm sick of Nick Saban. I don't want
Mhm.
Alabama to win any more games, much less national titles. So I root hard against Alabama. I'm still in on Georgia for now. Just because I think that the way they play is just crazy fun to watch. Like TCU last year had athletes, right? TCU was running everybody off the field, and they got into a game against Georgia and looked like a D2 team. And
Yeah,
I
Jordan.
think that Georgia's still early in that level of dominance that I can enjoy it.
Yeah, well, I mean, back-to-back national championships. What has it only been done like 6 times or 5 times or something like that in the history of NCAA football? So they do it a third time, or the first time ever, and then I'll be done with it. I'll be like, okay, let's get some new
Yeah.
blood in there.
Either that
But
or Kirby Smart's going to do something shitty that makes me not like him. That's where I landed with Dabo Swinney and Clemson. I was like,
is
oh
it
yeah,
because of the
Clemson, they're
cult?
super.
Like, is
Yeah,
is it the?
he just sucks, man.
Mhm.
I'm just out on him.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it.
Get some
Well,
images of him up.
me and Peter, we're both Washington State University alums, so we're in
Oh,
mourning.
damn.
We're in mourning right now as
Damn, that's
our
tough,
team
dude.
is pretty much dead in the water right now. Probably going to end up in the Mountain West, or Mountain West teams end up filling out Pac-12. I don't know how it's going to work, but it's essentially going to be a G5 school at this point. And,
Yeah,
you
that
know, it is
sucks.
what it is. Money kills college football, in my opinion. I think money ruins it, especially these TV dollars. Regionality's evaporating from the game. So
Yep.
the matchups are going to be great. The games during the regular season, I mean, USC on the road in November to play Wisconsin, gonna love watching that game. But
Yeah.
definitely going to be an adjustment for the men of Troy to go play in a blizzard. That's going to be interesting. So it's yeah.
I just hope with Washington State specifically, and I'm not saying this because you guys went there. I genuinely feel this way because A, Clay Thompson, but B, I have a couple of friends who I've known on the internet for a long time who went there. And so I just kind of keep an eye on Washington State. Every Washington State game looks lit. It looks like so much fun.
We have fun.
That's because we never know if we're gonna win or not. So there's no
Right,
sure
and-
things. It's always an adventure.
Yeah, like yeah. Like they're never great. They they've had some good years, but they're like the atmosphere just always seems like it kicks ass, and I just hope that doesn't go away.
I don't think that'll go away because of the spirit of the university, but I think the magnitude with which it's covered and the magnitude with which it's like, I think the quality of play is going to change because the dollars aren't going to be there.
Yeah.
And so I don't think we'll probably ever see a repeat of what happened 5 years ago, which was when College Game Day went there and that absolutely beautiful scene in Pullman where we upset at Oregon and Gardner Minshew, led us to victory with Mike Leach. Rest in peace.
That's incredible.
That was an incredible moment in college football. I don't care who you're a fan of. But that's not why we're here. We're getting off topic. We gotta get
football's
back.
on topic.
That's right. Well, yeah, but we brought this gentleman in for one reason, because we want insight on the San Francisco 49ers 2023 football season. Give us your take. What do you like? What do you dislike? What do you think about the Niners going into the 2023 season?
I think that all the preseason prognostication about them, like I think it's correct, because you see any power ranking, they're behind Kansas City and Philly and Buffalo and Cincinnati.
No, they're third right now in a lot of power rankings.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So they're in that. Okay, they're in a tier below. To me, it's Kansas City, Philly, And then there's that second tier of team, and you can order Bills, Bengals, Niners, however you want. But I
Yeah.
think the thing that holds me back from putting San Francisco in the Philly, Kansas City realm is their quarterback. Like, I think roster wise, they might have the best roster top to bottom in the league. I'm not the homer type who would just say that. I genuinely think they're loaded at so many positions that if they had a quarterback who was a top consensus top 12, if they had Dak Prescott, it would be a
No,
Super
you
Bowl
don't.
favorite.
No, he led the league in picks last year. You don't want.
Last year. Yeah, last year. But
Have you seen the Have you seen the clips? Have you seen the clips? He's getting
they've
cussed
been
out
pretty
by his
bad.
DBs. It's
Yeah,
not
no,
good.
they haven't been great. But I think but that's a Mike McCarthy led team, and Mike McCarthy's a disaster. I think that a guy like Dak Prescott and a Kyle Shanahan offense would be significantly improved. But the point is, pick any top 12 quarterback. If you plug them in with the Niners, I think a lot of people are going, "Wow, this is the best team in the NFC or the best team in the NFL or whatever." But the quarterback position is too important, and everything that's going on with them at that position is a pretty massive question mark. Brock Purdy, as good as he was in his 5+ games at the end of last regular season, that's 5 games. That's not a huge sample size, and he was pretty good. He was not great. There were a handful of things that he did that he's going to need to do better. I think he got lucky on a couple of interceptions that turned out to not be interceptions that might have changed games. There was one against Tampa Bay in his first start. There was one up there in Seattle on Thursday night, Quandre Diggs dropping a pick that swung that game. And then
Brutal.
Trevon Diggs dropped an interception in the red zone in that playoff game against Dallas. It might have swung the game. So there's these like handful of plays that changed the way that Brock Purdy is perceived, right? So I'm still thinking the jury's out on him. That's how I'm going into this year. Plus, he's coming off a catastrophic elbow injury. He looks fine in camp, which is great. But what do you look like when there's a pass rush around you trying to hit you? That's a question mark that needs to be answered. Trey Lance, I think, is a massive question mark. I don't think he sucks like a lot of people do. I'm still very open to the idea that he could be good. He just needs to play. And then
I
Sam
mean,
Darnold. Like Sam
yeah,
Darnold
that's
stunk.
where I was going. That's an option, right? Sam Darnold has legitimate NFL starting experience. So all three of these quarterbacks, I would put them on an even playing field and see who comes out on top if I'm Shanahan, right?
Yes, you are right. That's not what they're doing. They're handing Brock Purdy the starting job. There's all this stuff in the offseason. I was getting really frustrated with it. There was all this stuff like Pro Football Focus wrote about the top storylines in training camps. And they put the number one storyline in the NFL was the quarterback battle between Brock Purdy, Trey Lance, and Sam Darnold. And that was never on the table. Kyle Shanahan,
Really?
John Lynch, anybody, they've been telling anybody with ears for the entire offseason, Brock Purdy's the starter when he's healthy. When Brock Purdy gets back, the job is his. He's QB1. He's earned that. And I kind of get it. They scored 33.5 points a game from the time he came in against the Dolphins through the end of the regular season. And then they hung up 41 on Seattle in the playoffs, and then they, fell apart against the Cowboys and Philly. But that's enough to me to say, yeah, hey, this guy, or not to me, but to them to say, hey, this guy's the starter, at least going into the year. And it's hard to argue with that, given how their offense looked. But if it was me, I'm with you guys. I would have said, hey, here's Sam Darnold, Trey Lance, and Brock Purdy. You're all going to split first and second team reps, and it's going to be a battle through the preseason. And week 1, it's going to be whoever the best quarterback was in camp is going to be the starter in week 1. But they're not doing that. It's going to be Brock Purdy.
I mean, I think the question is now, how short is the leash? Is there a leash? And if there is, how short is it? And then the secondary question is, who's QB2? Is it Trey Lance? Most likely, right? Because of how much draft capital you gave up to get him. Or is it Sam Darnold? Is Sam Darnold just that veteran that we bring in just in case we run into a situation like we did last year where our top 2 quarterbacks both got injured and we're in the playoffs and now we're like, who's going to play? I think I don't know. Sam Darnold feels like too good of a quarterback just to bring in as a, veteran.
Does he though?
He's a former top 10 pick. I mean,
Yeah, but he's so all right. So there's a you touched on a bunch of stuff here that I think is like the correct conversation to be having. First, how long is the leash with Brock Purdy? For me, you got to give him a couple of games, assuming, that it depends a little bit on how it looks too. If he's
mhm.
just a total disaster week 1 against Pittsburgh, I think immediately the conversation begins like, "Oh, hey, reality set in for the Mr. Irrelevant." Like that I think is there. But I don't think Shanahan's the type of coach that's going to pull the plug that early. If he's gonna start Purdy and be this convicted that Purdy is the guy, then he's gonna give him half a dozen games before really pulling the plug on him as the starter. I think. But as far as who the backup is, that's where the legitimate competition is, and that's Trey Lance. It's Sam Darnold. I think the draft capital aspect of this that you brought up is out the window. Like that's gone. That's
Really?
yeah. I think they're way past the roster politics part of this. Like they need to win a Super Bowl. And if they think that Sam Darnold gives them a better chance to do so, then he's going to be the backup quarterback to play in the event that Brock Purdy either stinks or gets hurt. But on the other hand, Sam Darnold in his career has started, I think, 55 games. And that whole like seeing ghosts clip from
Mm.
Monday Night Football against the Patriots, that's him. Like when the lights come on and the games start, he's going to make 5 or 6 plays that make you go, wow, that is why he was the number 3 overall pick. And then he's going to make 5 or 6 plays where you're like, oh, he's seeing ghosts.
Well,
And
I kind of feel for Sam Darnold a little bit. You look at the
Mhm.
organizations that he's been at. I mean,
Yeah,
he's not
sure.
been at historically quarterback-friendly organizations, right? You look at the Jets, you look at the Panthers.
Mhm.
You're not impressed. At least I'm not impressed.
No
So,
doubt.
I think that there's something to be said with taking a quarterback who's in those types of situations and putting them in a good organization that will bring them along and give them an opportunity. I think you see the fruits of that actually happening in Seattle with Geno Smith, who was a top
Mhm.
10 quarterback, bounced around the league as a backup after failing as a starter for surprise, surprise, the Jets. Given the opportunity last year, competing against Drew Lock,
Mhm.
and wins a job and has a top 5 season for quarterbacks last year in the NFL statistically. So I didn't expect it. I don't think Peter expected it either. We weren't sitting here thinking the Seahawks are going to make a playoff run
Sure.
No
at
one
the beginning of
expected it. How
last
many
year.
games were they favored in? Under 5? Like 2 to
Yeah,
4
like
game, 2 to 4
3.
wins or something?
Yeah, their
Yeah,
preseason over under was like 5.5.
yeah, and there was a lot of pundits prognosticating the under on that, and
Yeah.
and so it's they had a magical run last year. It's hard to say magical at 9-8 and losing in the first playoff game, but you still have to say for a team that wasn't even supposed to get close to
Yeah.
make it there, it was kind of cool to see. But my point being is like, is there Sam Darnold clearly a talented quarterback? He's got a big
Sure.
arm.
Sure.
He's a good athlete. He's
Mhm.
been talented enough to start 55 games in the National Football League. You don't get to start 55 games in the National Football League if teams don't see something in you, you know?
No doubt.
And so it'll be interesting from my perspective with Kyle Shanahan. Okay, you've had Trey Lance for a couple years. He's had his injury problems. You've seen him up close. Now
Mhm.
you've had Sam Darnold for a little bit. Let's see him play in the preseason, see how they do.
Yeah.
But from a Kyle Shanahan perspective, if what you're saying is true and the draft capital argument is out the window, it's going to clearly be like who's the best option, and I strongly think that Sam Darnold has the edge because I just haven't seen any flashes from Trey Lance that have been on the level of what I've seen from Sam Darnold. And
So so Lance has been pretty good in camp and at least as good if not better than Darnold so far.
okay.
And there's the fascinating part of it is Sam Darnold is really good on the like in breaking stuff, short to intermediate in breaking stuff that the Niners offense, it's kind of their bread and butter, right?
Yeah.
But Lance is really improved in the intermediate area, that 10 to 19 yards down the
Those
field.
comeback
Really,
routes, those out
yeah,
routes. Yeah.
yep. And he has the arm strength to make those throws. He's really improved there. The short stuff, like the stuff in the flats and screens and stuff, he's still working on that, but there's definite like steps forward and improvement there. So I think if it's like a dead heat where, and I genuinely don't think that either quarterback is really going to separate themselves to the point that, to people watching, to the fans watching, it's like, oh, that guy is clearly the better quarterback. I don't think that's going to happen. I
Yeah.
think whatever decision they're going to make is going to come down to like minutia of like how they tie their feet to their throws on this particular route, or this player, whether it's Lance or Darnold, can operate these number of throws that Shanahan really wants him to do. It's like going to be these tiny aspects of their game that are going to be the difference. I don't think we're really going to see it necessarily in training camp
Mhm.
or the preseason. The thing I think that's going to separate them is Lance's legs. And that's not to say that Darnold isn't a good athlete, or that they're going to lean heavily on a designed run game with Lance, because frankly, I think he stinks at that. But there's been enough evidence in the small sample size he has in game situations that he can improv on a third and 11, throw's not there, he's going to run for 12. And
Yeah.
he's created enough first downs like that it wouldn't surprise me if that's kind of the thing that gives him an edge, because you're right, Sam Darnold's super talented. And I think this is the best situation he's been in. It's the best offense he's ever been in, best coaching staff he's ever been under. He's
Yeah.
going to play the best football he's
I
played, but
think
I think that one thing gives Lance an edge.
yeah, I agree with you. I think it's going to come down to both the escapability and the improvisational ability of either one of those quarterbacks. But I think that this Niners team reminds me, because of the strength of the rest of their roster around the quarterback position, it does kind of remind me of different strengths, obviously, but those Seahawks teams that went to back-to-back Super Bowls, because that was rookie
Sure.
year or second year Russ. He wasn't asked to do some of the things he was asked to do in the 3, 4, or 5 years after that, right?
Right.
And so what it came down to is, hey, don't turn the ball over, right? Don't beat us. So I think the guy that ends up walking away with the number 2 job is going to be the guy that doesn't turn the football over. And I think that right now actually favors Trey Lance, because Sam Darnold has been known to turn the ball over. He has a lot of confidence in his arm. He tries to fit it into tight windows sometimes, and he's done that since he was in college. So,
right. Yeah, I'm with you. I agree.
Moving past the quarterback position a little bit, there's been historically some concern with Christian McCaffrey's health. Is that a concern for you guys going in? I know you have Elijah Mitchell, but is not having McCaffrey, or potentially him having injury issues, something you guys are even thinking about?
I mean, yeah, because this team has been so banged up. I think that's just the case kind of for all of their good players. It's like, how do they survive without Christian McCaffrey? How do they survive without Nick Bosa or Trent Williams or Fred Warner? Like, I think you can. That's always a concern. Like I said, because of the history with this team. McCaffrey did play all 17 games last year. He had a little bit of a knee thing, but that he had to work through and they had to manage. But all accounts are he took really good care of his body in the offseason, and he's been really effective in camp and going hard and working hard. So that's I think they're in the back of your mind, but not necessarily in a way that's different from any other of their good players.
Yeah, I had him in my fantasy league last year, and that trade was probably the best moment of the season for my fantasy team. To be honest with you,
he really took off in San Francisco, man.
There was some. I gotta be a little critical though. The Niners. I review their draft a little bit, and I mean, a kicker in the 3rd round. I know you're moving on from Robbie Gould, but in the 3rd round,
Dude.
And
Kyle
you've
Shanahan
already
made fun
and you've
of
got
it.
Zane Gonzalez on the roster, so you have another kicker.
So,
And
all right. So
Go
here's
on.
how the team here's how the team has justified it. All right.
They
Like I
haven't.
said, Kyle Shanahan in his post practice, or not post practice, but post draft presser, made fun of the fact they picked a kicker. When he called Jake Moody the best day of Jake Moody's life. I don't want to put that on him. One of the best days of Jake Moody's
Easily.
life.
The best
Easily the
day.
best
Yeah,
day.
that's fine.
Easily.
You can say that.
He gets a call from Kyle freaking Shanahan, and Shanahan's like, "Hey, you're a kicker and we drafted you, so I could have taken a running back, but we needed a kicker, so we took you."
And
Like
then they
that.
signed Zane Gonzalez.
Well, they had traded for Zane. They had traded for Zane Gonzalez before the draft, and that
Okay.
trade was a 2025 seventh round pick swap, Carolina. So it's like the least thing you can trade for a player, because Carolina was just going to cut him. So what the Niners are trying to do is they bring in Zane Gonzalez. And they brought him in the event that they were really gung ho about Jake Moody. Their special teams coach Brian Schneider is like, there's nobody like this guy. He's unbelievable. We put him in a torture chamber and he was still making kicks. Like the hyperbole around this kid's ridiculous. But they brought in Gonzalez in case they couldn't find a kicker that they liked in the draft. And that way they at least had one on their roster and they had a guy. Now they're keeping Zane Gonzalez around, hoping that a team will trade for him and they can get a draft pick for this kicker. It's a weird thing. But
Well,
Moody's been really good in camp for what it's worth. Like, I mean, I know that doesn't mean shit if he's missing kicks in the regular season or in the playoffs, but like,
yeah.
he's checking boxes. But I've said, I wrote this at Niners Wire, like, this dude needs to be Justin Tucker to justify drafting him with a top 100 pick in a year where you didn't pick until number 87. Like, that's a wild use of draft resources.
My favorite pick that they had was Cameron Latu out of Alabama. We actually got to see him play live this year. He's different from George Kittle, right? He's a split out guy, fluid route runner, great hands. He's one of those split him out like OJ Howard type guys, right? And let him go match up against the safety and be a mismatch in the seam type of guy.
Yeah.
Whereas George Kittle's one of those end line old school blockers. He can go out and catch passes with the best of them. But having him at tight end, Latu, George Kittle's had some injuries. I thought that was a good pickup for him. There's a lot. You guys lost a lot. I mean, obviously you brought Sam Darnold in, but you lost Jimmy G. Jimmy Ward is a big loss, I think, at safety. Mike McGlinchey is a big loss at offensive tackle. Pardon the pun. He's a large man. Emmanuel Mosley is a huge loss at corner. I think he's a great player. So there's definitely some pieces. That defense was so good last year. You know, there's definitely some holes that they're going to be asking some younger guys to fill, I think. And realistically, in free agency, they went out and addressed the middle of the defense with Hargrave, and they brought Hyder back. And then, the double kicker move, which was interesting.
I think,
but outside of that,
So losing Jimmy Ward was pretty significant, and I think losing Mike McGlinchey is going to be more significant than some fans realize. So with McGlinchey specifically, he's a very good run blocking tackle, and a so-so pass blocker. Like,
McGlinchey is a borderline Hall of Famer in my book. Like, he's been that consistent throughout his career. I think he's that good.
Okay, so I'm glad I don't have to try and argue this with you. So, so you get it then. And there are some 49er fans because he was prone to having some really bad pass blocking reps. Like, every once in a while in pass pro, he would just disappear. And that's what people would latch onto. I think the team's gonna have a hard time replacing him. And they re-signed Colton McKivitz, this guy they drafted a few years ago. And he's going to be their starting right tackle. He's basically been given the job. They didn't bring in a ton of competition for that. I think it's going to be, that's a huge question mark for them. And I think they're going to have a tough time replacing McGlinchey, but also they weren't going to be able to pay him. The Broncos cashed out. That was way outside of what the Niners are going to afford.
They were trying to protect Russ.
Yeah. I mean, you have to, right? Especially at this age. But Jimmy Ward, I'm so glad you brought him up because I feel like he's so underappreciated by people who are not like super dialed into the 49ers. And the fact that he was a top 100 player, and I know the NFL top 100 is kind of a shit show, but he was voted a top 100 player by his peers for playing free safety. And then he gets hurt, and they bring in Tayshaun Gibson, and Tayshaun Gibson gets that job, and they bring Ward back and put him in the slot and put him at nickel corner.
Mm-hmm.
And he was good there.
Yeah.
And the fact that he has that versatility, that's nutso. Like that's really, really tough to replace. So they re-signed Gibson. They drafted Jair Brown out of Penn State. He's a player I really, really like. He hasn't done a ton in camp yet, but I think he's going to be one of those players that like his game will translate in games more than it does in practice.
He's gonna have to be.
Yeah,
I think with the two starters they lost essentially in the secondary, they need guys that weren't starting to step up, and that means they're the rookies. That means guys that might have been second or third string on the depth chart. And quite frankly, if we're being honest, you saw it in the Eagles game against the Niners last year. The Niners' strength wasn't always run defense. They're great at getting after the passer, right? But the Eagles ran the ball right down their throats. And yeah, they brought in Hargrave and Hyder, but those guys aren't necessarily run stoppers. So
Hargrave's definitely more of a pass rusher for sure. Like run stopping is not his fort, but honestly, I'm not super worried about their run defense. They were the number 1 run defense in the league last year, and the Eagles pushed them around a little bit, but I think that had a lot to do with how that game went late and the 49ers just kind of realizing that they weren't going to win and they didn't really have a chance to win. And I think that's especially you just like middle of the third quarter, you really saw the wheels come off for their defense. And I think
they're running with their third string quarterback too. I mean, there's nothing they could do offensively against that Eagles.
Yeah, their quarterback couldn't throw. Torn ACL. So I'm not. I honestly like they signed Isaiah Oliver from down there in Atlanta. He's obviously had his injury issues, but when he's been on the field and playing in the slot, he's been a pretty good player. So I think they're banking big time on him. Deommodore Lenoir, who replaced Emmanuel Mosley last year, actually had a pretty up and down regular season, but in the playoffs didn't allow a touchdown, had 2 picks and allowed a quarterback rating of like 28. He was excellent in the playoffs. So I'm interested to see his development, but no, there's definitely question marks in the secondary. There's question marks on the offensive line. There's ways that this could unravel outside of
I think
sure.
you guys have the best offensive lineman in the league in Trent Williams. I think that's pretty much a universal truth at this point.
Yeah.
But losing McGlinchey on the other side, because I mean, predominantly the reason you have the best you pay the left tackle so much money is because they put their best pass rusher out there. But oftentimes we've seen now if you have a dominant left tackle, teams will flip it just to try and get pass rush on there. And McGlinchey, while like you said, he did disappear at times. Well, he was most of those times going up against elite pass rushers, and he just got beat because he's not Trent Williams.
Right.
It doesn't mean he's a bad player.
Went around. There's this rep that went around when they were playing the Cowboys, where Micah Parsons gets him to cross his feet, and when you cross your feet as an offensive tackle, you're fucked.
It's
like
over.
You're just done. And it's Micah freaking Parsons, who's going to be a Defensive Player of the Year candidate for the next freaking decade. And Parsons gets him to cross his feet, and then just gets his hand, gets like his right hand under his pads, and just tosses McGlinchey to the side. It was a tough rep. It was not a good rep, but that's the kind of play that like Niners fans like zoom in and take video, and they're like, "Oh, McGlinchey stinks." I'm like, "Nah, man, he got crossed up by the best pass rusher, like in one of the best pass rushers in the league." Like, let's relax on calling this guy trash.
It's the hardest thing to do in the NFL is play offensive line. Some people say it's play cornerback, but I'd say offensive line with these athletic freaks that are coming off the edge, especially offensive tackle positions, because you got a quarterback throw the ball 30 times a game, he drops back. You have one bad rep, and that's all everybody talks about all week. So you could win 29 out of 30. You have one bad rep, and they talk about it for weeks, off seasons, years, and it's incredible.
Yeah, these are defensive ends who are running. They're like the size of Richard Dent with the athleticism of Walter Payton, and you're just supposed to block that person when they have a head of steam? No shit, dude. The fact that any offensive lineman stonewalls any pass rusher is a freaking miracle.
Well, it shows you how athletic some of these offensive linemen are.
Oh, totally.
Pete, what do you got? You got any? You've been awful quiet there. You still up? We got a thunderstorm going on in our neck of the woods.
I was gonna say if I drop off, it's we've got storms rolling through. So if I drop off, it's because I lost power. No, I've just been listening. Thunderstorms.
Yeah, thunder and lightning.
It is 95 degrees here today, and the sun is out.
Pitch dark.
And you
here,
have
and it's 3 in the
what
afternoon.
Yeah.
This is Georgia in the spring and summer. It rains all the time. It's not just rain. Excuse me. It doesn't rain.
Hey, by the way, it's
storms.
thunder and lightning. It's pitch dark. It's 87 degrees. So don't get it twisted.
This is tornado weather.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Sorry.
I'm gonna click.
No, I was gonna say you're talking about defensive rankings. The fantasy rankings for several sites actually have the Niners as the number 1 fantasy ranked defense. So I know there's some drop offs there, but
well, they do get to play the Cardinals twice, so that does help. That does help.
I was also going to talk about their records coming up. I did have them not at the 13 wins this year like they did last year, but only losing one more game. I still have them at 12 wins, and I still have them winning the division. But wanted to see what you guys thought about that.
I have them depending. I think they get to like 11-6, but it wouldn't shock me if they were like 10-7.
I was waiting for 17-0. I thought it was coming. I thought maybe.
No, dude, their schedule's so loaded, dude. They have their home opener is a Thursday night game against the Giants, and I think the Giants are going to be okay. But then they have they have the Cowboys. They are at Cleveland. They're at Minnesota. They have the Jags coming off their bye, but the Jags are also coming off their bye, and the Niners have to go to Florida. They have a stretch where they play the Seahawks in Seattle on Thursday night on Thanksgiving. And then the following Sunday, they go to Philadelphia to play the Eagles. And then they come home to host the Seahawks in a 3-week stretch. Like, that's brutal, dude. They have the Ravens at home. Their schedule's tough.
Do they travel this year at all overseas?
No.
European, okay.
Mm-mm.
They call that 3-week stretch is the Seahawks, Eagles, Seahawks. That's the birds of prey stretch right there. That's what they have to deal with.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. According to ESPN, the Niners are favored in all but one game, and that is Philadelphia.
Philly game. Yeah.
It's the only game they're not favored in this entire season. There's a couple that don't have lines out, but
it's too easy to because when you start going through a schedule, if you're going to pick the Niners wins based on teams they're better than, you have them at 16-1, maybe 15-2, depending on how you feel about the Cowboys, right? Or the Bengals. But you start to go through this and you go, okay, what are the games that they could possibly slip up? Okay, really tough game. I don't think they're going to win that game. And then you have home against the Cowboys. Cowboys are a really good team. They were extremely well matched in the divisional playoffs last year. That's not a walkaway win. Could you see them losing in Cleveland if Deshaun Watson is back and looking like Deshaun Watson? Yeah, sure. Could you see them losing in Minnesota on a Monday night?
No,
Monday. You're right. Monday night against Kirk Cousins.
I think the Browns game is more dangerous to them than the Vikings.
Minnesota doesn't have Dalvin Cook anymore, and that piece out of that offense makes that offense infinitely less terrifying to me.
I think you're right, but I think Jordan Addison, Justin Jefferson might be really elite, and now they have T.J. Hawkinson.
Well, I mean, they had Adam Thielen in that receiving core last year, and he was one of the best number 2 receivers in the league. That was kind of what he was known for.
Right.
Addison's going to be a rookie. There's still going to be a learning curve. But not having the ability to have that run game, that effective run game, to take the pressure off a guy like Kirk Cousins, with all due respect to Kirk Cousins.
So you're all aboard the Alexander Madison isn't actually a good train?
My cohort is not. My cohort is all aboard we're drafting Madison, second round in the fantasy draft.
Number 1 overall.
But I think Madison was effective when he was put in the place to start when Dalvin Cook was injured. But if he's the only one, right, and not a change of pace, I don't know. I feel like people are gonna figure him out. I don't see
I
it.
think I'm with you.
Yeah.
I think I'm with you. He's averaging the last 2 years, he's averaging less than 4 yards a carry. Like, come on, man.
That's what I'm saying.
But yeah, the Niners, like, I can see them losing to the Bengals. They can lose any time, any year they can lose to the Seahawks. The Eagles are better than them. They could easily lose to the Ravens at home. Could they slip up and lose that game in Washington, depending on how
No,
the Commanders look this year?
no,
They
no. It's
might.
not gonna
They
happen.
might. They could.
Not
They
gonna
could.
happen. Not
You
gonna
think
happen. No
so?
way.
Really?
No
I-
way.
It's coming
No
off.
way, bro.
So they play Christmas Day against the Ravens at home, and then they play December 31, 6 days later, on a 10 a.m.
New Year's
start
Eve.
in Washington. New Year's Eve. Washington's defense might be legit this year. You're gonna have Ron Rivera coaching for his job, maybe.
I don't know,
It
dude.
just
At
weird shit
December
happens in
30,
the NFL, man.
December 31st, the Washington Redskins are gonna have like 3 wins on the year, and the Niners are gonna be trying to
Because they're gonna change
secure
their
home
name again.
home
So
field
it'll be a
advantage.
different. It won't even be the Commanders.
Oh
by the
yeah,
end of the
it's
year.
not
They're
the
gonna
it's not
change
the
their name
Commanders, it's
again.
not the Redskins, it's the football team or the Red Wolves or whatever the hell else they're gonna pull out of their ass. And I'm sorry. The 49ers, if the 49ers lose to the Commanders or whatever their team name's gonna be on New Year's Eve, man, that's a blow. Like for a team
So-
that's supposed to be competing for the NFC Championship, that you should not lose to a team like the Commanders.
No, I totally agree. You should not. But let's rewind to 2019, because this is the game I always point to. In 2019, the 49ers, you'll remember, started 8-0. They lost to the Seahawks at home on Monday Night Football in overtime in week 10.
I remember
Moved
that.
to 8-1. By
Felt
week
good.
12, they hosted the Packers, and they went on the road to Baltimore, on the road to New Orleans. And then they came home at 11-2 to face a Falcons team that finished the year 7-9, and they lost to the Falcons at home. In a game that's a game that we would have circled before the year and gone, if this team wants to win a Super Bowl, you can't lose at home to the Falcons. And they did, because weird stuff happens.
Because
So
Matty Ice is Matty Ice, you know? Sometimes he flings the rock around and they get a win.
I circled this
Seahawks
Buccaneers
lost to the
game.
Falcons last year at home. What?
The Niners lost to the Falcons too.
I know. In Atlanta. Atlanta's just got the numbers of the guys in the NFC West.
They got juice. But like the Bucs game, for example, on November 19th at home, that's one the Niners aren't going to lose. Like that's one that,
Imagine.
like, circumstantially,
Dude, imagine.
that's a tough one to see him losing.
Like
Imagine
Kyle
Baker.
Trask leads the Buccaneers in.
Excuse me, Kyle Trask. Sorry.
It's not Baker. By that point in the season, Baker will have lost the job.
Hey,
Let's be honest.
Jarrett Stidham lit him up last year.
That's right. That's right. But Kyle Trask will be the starter in the second half of the season for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. There's Baker. I heard a report from Colin Cowherd this week where his opinion on Baker was that he should retire and go call college football games and save his legacy, because reports out of Bucs camp were that it was a legit quarterback battle between Kyle Trask and Baker Mayfield. And I'm just like, holy smokes. So I've got for the record, I've got the Niners going 12-5 this year. The NFC West crossover with the AFC North and the NFC East this year, that's 2 tough divisions to go and play teams against. So arguably, you could make the argument that those are the 2 best divisions in football in the NFL. So the Eagles, the Giants, the Cowboys, the Steelers, the Browns, and the Bengals, and the Ravens. I'm not giving the Commanders that credit of putting them in the good team quality opponent spectrum, but everybody else is. I got them at 12-5. I got them winning the division. I think they're the best team hands down in the NFC West, unfortunately. But I got the Seahawks splitting with them. I can't do it. I can't give you guys another sweep against us. We got to get one. We got to get one.
I'd be pretty surprised if they won both against Seattle again.
Yeah, fingers crossed. We'll see what happens. You know, Gino's got expectations this year. When's the last time Gino had expectations? It's going to be interesting.
Yeah. I was trying to remember. Oh yeah, they played. That's right. Seattle was week 2 last year, and they had the blocked field goal for a touchdown or whatever it was.
We were riding high. All right. We had put it on Russell Wilson the week prior after he rode out of town with Broncos country.
Right.
So honestly, losing to you guys week 2 didn't even register. We were still just riding. We were riding so high from beating the Broncos week 1. Oh, that was the sweetest chef's kiss.
That was so great. That was so great.
What a
Russell
fun
Wilson
year.
just kicked the shit out of the Niners for so long that watching him face plant like that in Seattle was.
Well, we just didn't like the way he went about it. Like, it's one thing if you're going to move on. Yeah, he kind of was a little pretentious. Okay, he kind of rubbed our nose in the dirt, and then he went down there to Denver, Broncos country. Let's ride. Here's my signature Subway sandwich, and then got beat by Geno week 1.
Do you guys see now though why there was so much disdain for him?
Yeah, but he was our guy though. That was when he was our guy.
Right. No. Okay. I just
we don't like him, but like only
it's just like Richard Sherman though.
It's
just like Richard Sherman though. Remember, you guys didn't like Richard Sherman at all. Then he was on your team and you loved him.
Oh, dude, big Sherm guy.
Yeah. When he was on our team, shaking his finger at Crabtree in the playoffs. You didn't like that. I know you didn't like.
I didn't even know what happened because I turned the game off the second that Malcolm Smith intercepted it. Bang. No, my mom my mom is a diehard 49er fan. She's the reason I'm a 49er fan. She's been a Niner season ticket holder for as long as I can remember.
That's cool.
That's actually really awesome.
And she hated Richard Sherman, right? And she's like, even when they signed him, I was like, you like him now? And she's like, no, I'll never like him. And just was staunchly anti-Richard Sherman. So I wasn't gonna buy her a jersey because that's kind of a lot, right? And remember, 2018 was the year that Jimmy got hurt and they stunk. That was Sherm's first year, and he had some injury complications in that 2018
Well, that's why
season.
the Seahawks didn't pay him.
Right, because he had the Achilles and
he was getting old, you know. He's just like, look, sorry, man.
Yeah. No, right. And I get it. Like the way I know he was all pissed about it, but the Seahawks did what every other team would have done in that situation. I totally get it.
Yeah, but Sherman, I don't think Sherman has any long-term resentment on that. I think Sherman's more mad about the fact that we threw the ball on the goal line.
We don't need to get into all that now.
Yeah, no, 1,000%. I'm totally with you guys. He definitely still rocks with Seattle. But I bought my mom like a Funko Pop of Richard Sherman for Christmas.
Yeah.
And she still displays that shit in her Niner room. It's still there. Yeah, like she came around.
But before you head out for fantasy implications, unlike the Cardinals, San Francisco is a team I'll be looking at for fantasy football this year. Chris McCaffrey, obviously. Debo, Brandon Ayuk. For me, Brandon Ayuk's a little more interesting from a fantasy perspective than Debo Samuel this year. George Kittle, for sure, and then their defense. And apparently the kicker is someone to also look at.
And for those Chris McCaffrey drafters out there, you should look into Elijah Mitchell. You're going to want to have that hamstring in your lineup on the bench.
Okay. He has an abductor strain right now as far as injury. But...
So interesting thing here. Don't sleep on Ty Davis Price. I'm not necessarily saying to draft him as the McCaffrey handcuff because it's going to be Elijah Mitchell, but Elijah Mitchell, and I think a second running back is going to get a lot of touches because I don't think they want McCaffrey taking those, especially like late in games or maybe goal line. I don't think they want McCaffrey taking those, inside runs, those punishing runs. But Ty Davis Price has been unbelievable by all accounts in camp. Like Kyle Shanahan is gassing this dude up. Do you know what you have to do to get Kyle Shanahan to gas you up in a press conference? Like, that's crazy that's happening. So his teammates, his coaches, everybody is saying that Ty Davis Price looks incredible, and he's already taken this huge leap, and that's continued when they've had pads on. And if Elijah Mitchell is going to be hurt, I think it might be Ty Davis Price getting a lot of the work. So like I said, maybe not draft him, but definitely have your eye on him on waivers. And if the Niners have any injury issues at running back, jump on the TDP train.
Oh, so there you go. You've got now 4 running backs for the Niners to think about. You've got McCaffrey, Ty Davis Price, Elijah Mitchell, and Debo Samuel, the 4th running back, to keep an eye on.
So I think it's interesting that you said that Brandon Ayuk intrigues you more from a fantasy perspective than Debo? Because I think I agree. Because the last time I looked at ADP, Ayuk was like 30 spots lower than Debo.
Which
Like
Insane.
is
three or
insane
four
value.
rounds
That's
later.
insane to me.
That's so
He's a
wild.
top.
Because
He
look,
was 20.
even
Was
if-
a top 25 wide receiver last year in fantasy, right?
was he? Did he finish that?
He
That's
he
nuts.
was within the top 30. I'm pretty positive. He was on my team. I played him quite
He
a
has
bit.
1,015 yards, 8 touchdowns. Like he was really good, right? So Debo came into camp this year. He's super slim down. He's in shape. He talked about he was awful last year and this and that. So I think we're going to see a bounce back from Debo this year. But the Debo we saw in 2021, the 1,400 receiving yards and the 365 rushing yards and the 14 total touchdowns, that was born out of necessity. That was born out of Raheem Mostert got hurt, Elijah Mitchell got hurt, Trey Sermon got hurt, and was also bad at football. But they needed a running back, and so he does, bro. The Eagles picked him up. You can't get carries on the fucking Eagles, like that's tough. But no, but they bring in Debo Samuel who can do this stuff, and they just leaned on him, and they were like, "Here, Debo, do stuff."
Yeah.
George Kittle's there now. Brandon Ayuk is remember Brandon Ayuk started that season in the quote unquote doghouse. He is no longer there. They have Christian McCaffrey.
Yeah.
I don't think Debo is going to be the fantasy weapon ever again that he was in 2021. And I'm with you. I think Ayuk is just on his way to being a better player.
Yeah.
And he's way cheaper.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. I think Debo will get drafted a little earlier than what people hope for.
Will George Kittle bounce back? Is he going to stay healthy this year, or is he injury prone all year?
I mean, George Kittle's just George Kittle's always going to be injury prone a little bit just because of the way he plays and the tenacity that he blocks with. But I mean, even if you're getting 15 games out of him, the thing that jumps out to me is you're never probably going to get 1,000 yards from him again. He's probably going to be in that 800 to 900 yard range, but I think his targets are going to stay up. And I think that his touchdown numbers are going to continue to stay. I think he had 6 in 2021, and I think he had 11 last year as a career high. But he
had 11 last year, 765 yards.
So I have this stat that I need to look up. I don't have it sitting in front of me. I should be able. Okay, so George Kittle. This is the thing that really jumps out to me with George Kittle, and the reason I think that he's going to be a good fantasy option moving forward, because maybe those big, explosive, long touchdowns aren't there anymore for him, and the volume isn't necessarily going to be there. But in 53 games between 2017 and 2020, he had 7 red zone touchdowns. In 2021 and 2022 combined in 19 games, he had 9 red zone touchdowns. He's improved as a red zone threat a lot, and that's like tangible. Like you can see it.
I think that
at contested catches. He's better at that now. He's gotten better on the sidelines, keeping his feet in bounds. Brock Purdy looks for him in those areas. So I think George Kittle is definitely a viable option in the second tier of tight end.
I think a lot of that has to do with the style of the offense that they're in now too. Like the running backs that they have available and the quarterback that they have available in the goal line situations. Like, if I remember correctly, those 20, you said all the dating back all the way to 2017. Is that what you said?
Yeah, his rookie.
If I'm not mistaken, Frank Gore was still on the team at that point. I could be wrong about that.
No, Frank Gore's last year was 2014.
Okay. All right. Well, I remember them having more physical runners years ago. Right? Yeah. Guys that were going in between the tackles and stuff like that. Right now, you've got Christian McCaffrey and Elijah Moore. Or no disrespect to those guys, but they're smaller running backs. They're not really bounded between the tackle guys. And having a tight end safety valve that you can dump the ball off to, or have a mismatch on the outside to in the red zone, makes a lot of sense, and it does seem to be right up Kyle Shanahan's MO to do stuff like that. So I think that helps with that strategy too.
Yeah, and I think the explosive TDs are still going to be there here and there because of Brock Purdy's ability to extend plays. And there were so many plays last year where pocket breaks down, he gets outside, and it's just really hard to cover George Kittle for a long time if you're a linebacker or a safety. So
I'm going to be honest. I think
there'll be some explosive plays in there too.
I'm going to be honest. I think Latu can step into that explosive play role. I think that both of them on the field are at the same time is down the road. If Latu develops like I think he has the ability to, I think he can be your down the field guy, and George Kittle can be your underneath guy, and you guys can live happily ever after with those two tight ends, and be very, very effective.
I think that's going to be the next kind of. This is the thing I've been pounding the table on all offseason, because they drafted 2 tight ends. They drafted Cameron Latu, who you mentioned, and then they drafted Braden Willis from Oklahoma, who's more of a move tight end, has more experience as a receiver because Latu came in as a defensive end to Alabama.
Yeah.
And was primarily a blocking tight end until the last couple of years when they started using him as a pass catcher. So I think they're hoping for like an ascension from him, or a continued ascension there as a receiver. Braden Willis is more of a like after the catch guy. He's not as physical as Latu, but I think their plan is the next zig that we're going to see from Kyle Shanahan is more 2 tight end stuff, whether that's 12 personnel or 22 personnel, 1 running back, 2 tight ends, or 2 running backs, 2 tight ends. I think that's how they're going to counter the kind of lighter, more athletic defenses that are on the field to stop these modern passing games.
Yeah.
I think if you can get big, get physical in the run game while also being able to throw out of those sets because you have 2 pass catching tight ends, I think that's
and then having Ayuk and Debo on the outsides too in that 12 personnel. I mean, that's going to be if I'm Shanahan, that's probably going to be my go-to package. Right? It's either going to be a 12
if one of those tight ends develops. Yes.
Yeah, it's either going to be a 12 or a 21 personnel where you have Mitchell and I might have said Elijah Moore earlier, but Elijah Mitchell and Christian McCaffrey on the field at the same time. Having both of them on the field at the same time, just the way he's able to get people open, he's truly a talented offensive mind and play caller. And so it's going to be exciting to see what the Niners do this year. They certainly have the talent on the roster to make a run.
Yeah, they do. And I think, well, we talk about all this stuff. With every team, it comes down to health. But I think with them, it's just going to come down to what happens with their quarterback play. If Brock Purdy looks like he did last year and puts up the numbers he put up last year, they're going to be pretty hard to beat. But if he regresses, it could get tough.
Yeah. Well, and then you've always got Trey Lance behind him. And Sam Darnold.
Or Sam Darnold. Yeah.
Who knows?
A lot of QBs.
Well,
Pete,
that might be a good place to end this segment, man. Really appreciate the time. Absolutely, we'd love to have you back in the future during the season if you're open to that. And before you head out, feel free to plug those plugs one more time.
What if I said no? What if I was just like, no, I'm not coming back?
All right, man. Well, this episode will never be posted, and you are not invited. And I'm taking my ball and I'm going home.
Yeah, no, hit me up whenever, guys. I'm on Niners Wire, NinersWire.com, Candlestick Chronicles, wherever you get your podcasts. And like I said, on Twitter at KyleAMadson, Madson.
Dude, I'm excited. I appreciate the time once more, and we'll talk to you soon, man. Good luck.
Yeah, anytime. Thanks, guys.
Thanks. Bye.
All right. I just moved him to the AFK.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so the Niners are winning the Super Bowl this year, apparently. Right?
I think so.
I mean, he talked me into it, although he was apprehensive in terms of records. But I don't know. If Brock Purdy doesn't turn the ball over, they remind me of the Seahawks when the Seahawks were good. They have such a talented roster around them.
They're going to be good. They're going to win games.
Yeah.
Just kind of how far can they go? And how far can they go with the full season under the Purd man? That's what I'm calling him.
Yeah, Mr. Irrelevant.
Could be Mr. Relevant, depending on how he does.
He's turning himself relevant. All right, what order you want to do this? Who's next on the chopping block?
You want to jump into the hot sheet or end on the hot sheet? Because
let's end on the hot sheet. Let's get through the NFC West. Give these teams their due.
Let's jump to the rival, our team, Seattle Seahawks.
Call the Hawks, baby.
The call.
9-8 last year, overperformed the expectations substantially, made the playoffs where they were abruptly dismissed by the aforementioned San Francisco 49ers. Key additions, we brought back Bobby. That's big. I think it's big for the locker room. I don't know how much he's got left in the tank, but having Bobby Wagner in that locker room to teach some of these young linebackers and teach some of these young players how to win and how to play the right way. Man, we missed him last year on defense. I can tell you that right now. The Seahawks defense was one of the worst in the National Football League, and a lot of that had to do with not being lined up in the right spots and being in the right formations and having guys who could diagnose offenses effectively and make audibles and changes. Bobby Wagner can do that. He's a Hall of Famer, future Hall of Famer in my book. But they did make some other ads that I was also intrigued about. They brought back Jarran Reed in the middle of their defensive line. Really like Jarran Reed. We drafted him originally out of Alabama. He went off to play for others, but now he's back. Also brought in Vermont Jones for the interior defensive line help. We had a lot of trouble stopping the run last year, so I'm hoping those guys can help along with Bobby. But probably the two biggest in terms of talent additions on this team, safety Julian Love comes over, and that's a huge pickup because of some of the health concerns we've had at the free safety spot with Jamal Adams. And I think Julian Love, if Jamal Adams is hurt, can fill in very nicely there. And linebacker Devin Bush, I feel like he's not being talked about a lot, but he was an incredible player for the Steelers last year. I think he's an intriguing player for the Seahawks. Him with Bobby Wagner, with some of those young linebackers that they have, I think that could be really nice. They do lose Poona Ford out of the middle. I like Poona Ford. He's a bowling ball. He's going to be good wherever he ended up. And then Rashad Penny, obviously, he's on the Eagles now. But we drafted a couple running backs to try and make that up. Rookie ads, obviously Devin Witherspoon with our 5th pick overall. I've heard mixed reviews on him. They say he's the raw talent and ability is there, but he's definitely got a learning curve to get up to speed. Luckily, the Seahawks have some good young corners in Tyreek Woolen and Kobe Bryant that they can lean on a little bit. And then Jackson Smith and Jigba. It's looking like, in terms of rookie wide receivers, he may be the most NFL-ready rookie wide receiver in this class. The reports I'm seeing is that he's lighting it up. And him and Geno have a great rapport. I actually saw a report this week that Geno Smith called Pete Carroll a week before the draft and said, we have to draft Jackson Smith and Jigba. Well, Pete made it happen, and I'm looking forward to that 3-headed monster in the wide receiver room with Tyler Lockett and DK. But I think maybe the best pick that they got was center. I'm going to take a stab at this, so bear with me. Olusegun Oluwatimi. Oluwatimi shortens his first name, out of Michigan. He's one of the best centers in college football last year. He was the leader of the Michigan offensive line that won the award for best offensive line last year. And I think he could come in. The Seahawks have, in the last couple of years, had trouble with their interior offensive line, specifically the center. And I think potentially he could come in and be an anchor point for them in the middle of the offensive line that they desperately need. Obviously, they re-signed Geno Smith. That was a nice little nugget for them. A lot of people thought they might go after a quarterback in the draft, but I mean, there was a clear drop off in teams' minds between the top 3 quarterbacks and the 4th quarterback in the draft this year. So last year they finished 9-8. They're favored in 8 games this year, so a lot more respect put on the Seahawks name coming into this season. I've got them going 10-7. I think they're going to be even better than last year. I like what they did in the draft. I like the free agency pickups they've had. Maybe I'm a homer on this, but I think they're going to be better across the board. I think Geno's confidence has got to be through the roof. If he can keep from turning the football over, he's going to be okay. I think they strengthened their receiver core around him. It's going to be interesting to see if Geno can replicate what he did last year with one of the top 5 receiving cores in the league, arguably. So I think the Seahawks have a chance at a wild card this year. What do you think?
I think they surpassed expectations by far and away from last year. So the expectations are at least double that, which is why I assume they came in at the 8-game mark. I would also agree that it is a top 5 receiving room. I'm just thinking about any of the other top 5s, probably Dolphins, Bengals,
Philly.
Yeah, Philly. So I put them up there with those rooms. Maybe number 5, maybe number 4. So receiving core is great. Assuming Geno doesn't drop off for any reason, it wasn't if it's not a fluke, then I agree that it's going to be 9+ games. Assuming their defense gets any better by any stretch, then 10 games for me is reasonable.
Yeah, I got him being better just by the sake of Bobby being in the locker room, even if he's not on the field. Yeah. I think Bobby Wagner's presence and his experience as a middle linebacker in the National Football League, specifically for this organization, this is probably his swan song, if we're being honest. And I think the Seahawks are going to love every second of having him be a part of this football team. So Quandre Diggs was pumped about it, by the way. He was pumped.
Yeah, the experience there from Bobby is going to be invaluable, especially someone who's gone to a couple Super Bowls. And what I am with so much emphasis on their wide receiver room, but it's typically a run first offense. There's some. I guess my concerns is almost with the running back room at this point. Hopefully they can stay healthy. Is all I'm trying to say.
Yeah, right now it's injuries. It's
not a whole lot of
Kenneth Walker. Kenneth Walker has an injury that initially they said he was going to miss a substantial time, and then 4 days later he was back at practice. Or I'm sorry, that was Charbonnet. 4 days later he was back at practice. So what the heck does significant amount of time mean to Pete Carroll? I don't know. Kenneth Walker, he's still dealing with some injuries. But let's not forget their 7th-round draft pick there out of Georgia. That young man, I think he was undervalued in the draft process, and a lot of people are saying, hey, we've got a player here. So I think there's some depth there. And the benefit for the Seahawks is there's a lot of free agent running backs out there right now. So if you're a team that
running backs out there,
so if you're a team that has a little bit of cap room and running back health issues, you got options. Leonard Fournette, he's out there. Ezekiel Elliott, he's out there. I don't believe the Jets have signed Dalvin Cook, so technically he's still out there. I could be wrong about that. So there's options. There's different, and Jonathan Taylor wants to trade, so he's out there, depending on if the Seahawks want to give up anything. So I think the Seahawks are okay right now for the running back position. Let's see how serious everything turns out to be. But with the way Geno threw the ball last year and the talent that they now have at both the wide receiver and tight end position.
And tight end, yeah, they're tight end.
They got 2 very good tight ends. They have 3 very good wide receivers, albeit one's a rookie. They have 2 to 3 capable running backs when healthy. Kenneth Walker had an outstanding year. This is a team that is set up to be an offensive juggernaut. And a lot of people forget, despite his lack of success, Geno has one of the prettiest deep balls in the league.
It's a soured name, and I think last year was
he had a top 5 statistical season, of any quarterback in the National Football League, and he is the reason the Seahawks made it to the playoffs. Without a performance like that last year from Geno Smith, right, wrong, or indifferent, they don't make the playoffs. And it's just that simple. A lot of that, Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf balled out, no doubt about it. Kenneth Walker had a great year, no doubt about it. Did they get lucky in a couple of games? Sure, everybody does if you make the playoffs. But the one thing that stands out that they got to get better at by a lot, which is surprising for a Pete Carroll coach team, is defense. And I think you can see that in the fact that I listed 5 free agent signees. They were all on the defensive side of the football. So the Seahawks understand that. They spent the number 5 pick in the draft on that. I think for the second straight year, the Seahawks have had an incredibly good draft overall. And if they can string a couple of these together, this is the type of stringing together good drafts with quality players that contribute that turn them into a very good team with the Legion of Boom and Russell Wilson. So I have a feeling that Geno Smith and where he's at this year, depending on how the Seahawks finish up, they will strongly be looking at a rookie quarterback next year in the draft. There's a lot of interesting names out there. Obviously, they're hoping they're not in the Caleb Williams sweepstakes. But some of those, the fourth, fifth quarterback overall, some of those guys are going to be pretty interesting names that the Seahawks are probably going to be looking at.
From a fantasy perspective, the Seahawks, I think you're lucky to have any one of those receivers on your roster now. I think you're going to get, I'm going to say it, even though I hate saying this phrase, some good value with Tyler Lockett. I think he's often overlooked and goes way later than what he's actually worth. DK Metcalf, clear and obvious choice there. Kenneth Walker, if he's healthy, is a nice RB1. Tight ends in Seattle are not always my favorite to go after, and in their defense, I would definitely wait on it. Maybe it's a streaming defense depending on how you're doing.
I would stay away from their defense.
And honestly, Geno Smith is an extremely good valued quarterback, especially if he gets even close to where he was last year. You can get him late into the rounds, and still be a higher than average serviceable quarterback.
And one of the things that you didn't mention is Jason Myers is a quality NFL kicker, and he is a good fantasy kicker. He's consistently a top 10 kicker. He's accurate. He doesn't miss very often. He's not going to hit 60-yarders or a lot of 50-yarders, but he'll get you your 40-yard field goal 9 times out of 10. So,
but yeah, I like where we're at. I think Seattle, I wouldn't call it a rebuilding stage. I think they're building onto something they've already started rebuilding, and I think a 10-win season, although difficult, is possible.
Yeah, I've got them at 10 wins. I think they finished 10-7. I think they're a game better than they were last year because of Jackson Smith and Jigga being on the team, because of the defensive line moves that they made, but predominantly, above all else, because Bobby Wagner's back on that defense. I don't think people look at Bobby Wagner now, especially after what he did with LA last year and the struggles the Rams had. Like, well, what the heck? He was injured most of the year and all this stuff. I don't even think he was that injured. I think he was just like, I'm not going to play on a team that doesn't have a shot. So he was just a healthy scratch a lot of the times, in my opinion. I could be wrong on that, but I think Bobby, he wanted to get some money. He got paid for a year, and then he was like, you know what? This isn't where I want to be. I want to be back home. So he got cut by the Rams or left the Rams, or they didn't pick up his option, whatever it was. And the Seahawks are like, hey, you want to do a little deal with us? Come back home for a year before you ride off into the sunset. And he looked at what they were able to do last year, making the playoffs, which, let's be honest, Bobby Wagner probably didn't think they were going to have a team that could make the playoffs last year when he decided to go down to the Rams. He probably thought, hey, look at the Rams. They still got a lot of those pieces from that Super Bowl team. If I go down there, I might be able to win a Super Bowl with them. Similar to what Richard Sherman thought when he went to the Niners, right? Knowing what they had on their roster, and both times, unfortunately for them, and fortunately for the Seahawks, it didn't work out that way. So I think Wagner is an incredibly good addition to this team. I think he makes incredible sense from a leadership and a locker room presence standpoint, let alone what he can do on the field. The guy can still play. Don't get it twisted. So I think the Seahawks are a game better at least this year. I think they compete for a wild card spot.
I agree. We are in agreement. I put them in second place in the division behind the Niners.
Yeah, I think that's the betting odds right now favor that.
Okay, let's jump right into the next team here, and we'll talk about the Rams. We'll keep Arizona for last, but the Rams
save the best for last. Smart.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, so we've got Matthew Stafford, we've got Cooper Kupp. I don't know a whole lot about Cam Akers. Maybe Tyler Higbee, but after that, man, what's going on there? They put a bunch of money in, they got their ring, and it's like they're not going to make a run this year. I think they probably know that as well. So is it a, like you said, like a swan song type of situation for Matthew Stafford? How many years do you think he's got left in him? I think they'll be a serviceable team. I don't think they're bad enough to go and get some first round draft picks. I don't think they're good enough to go to the playoffs. So I think they're just kind of meh. They'll win some, they'll lose some, and hopefully nobody gets hurt. That's kind of with the Rams.
I think the best player on the Rams is Aaron Donald. He's one of the best players in the league. And I think he's probably telling his agent that if things don't look good by week 6, see if we can convince him to trade me because I want to try to play to win. Because he's probably only got a couple years left. And I don't know if he wants to be on with this franchise who has no semblance of planning for the future. I think Sean McVay is on the hot seat by his own volition. I think he wants to be on the hot seat because I don't think he wants to be on a team that's getting beat down. He likes riding high and, driving nice cars and going to parties in LA. But you look at the Rams, they added, in free agency, a center named Coleman Shelton. I don't know who that is. I'm not familiar with Coleman Shelton, but that is their only free agent ad, more than likely because they had roughly $1.5 million of cap space because of their poor financial planning. They lost Taylor Rapp, safety, to Buffalo, D-tackle Ashawn Robinson to the Giants, D-tackle Greg Gaines to Tampa Bay, along with quarterback Baker Mayfield to Tampa Bay, who came in and played pretty well for him last year. Credit to Baker Mayfield on that. I did like some of their draft picks. I looked at the Rams draft, and I thought they drafted quite well. I'm a big fan of guard Steve Avila out of TCU. He's their first-round pick. I think he's a hard-nosed, aggressive, physical offensive lineman. I think he'll fit in very, very well for them there. Also, running back Zach Evans out of Ole Miss, sneaky late-round draft pick that I think could supplant Akers at some point if he develops the right way. Let's not forget they have the perennially still a student Stetson Bennett, who just doesn't want to get a degree at this point. But there's been reports that he's been playing really well in camp because that's what he majored in. He majored in football at Georgia, and
Wouldn't he be cool? Wouldn't he be? What if he's decent? What if he's decent right out of the rip?
He might be. You don't know. He got into Georgia twice and went there for 7 years and didn't get a degree.
Yeah,
that's an accomplishment. Won 2 national championships, by the way. All name team alert. Wide receiver rookie out of BYU, Puka Nacua. Big fan. Also, this young man's a hell of a player. I really like Puka Nacua. I'm gonna say it, and I don't want anybody to freak out. This is Cooper Kupp light. All right, this is Cooper Kupp light. He plays a lot like Cooper Kupp. Right? He's not a super athlete, right? He's good route runner, good hands, big but not super big. Like he's not DK, but he's a big receiver, Played for BYU, was their best receiver for 2-3 years. Puka Nacua, keep an eye out on Puka Nacua as that rookie receiver that might make some noise in that offense. With Matt Stafford at the helm. They're favored in 3 games. Yeah. They went 5-12 last year. If Aaron Donald and Stafford and Kupp are healthy, and the pieces that they have paid that are still there are healthy, I got them in such a wide spectrum, right? They could be 9-8. They could be 5-12 again. And anywhere in between. Because if Cooper Kupp's healthy, he's still arguably a top 5 receiver in the league. And I think the connection that him and Stafford had, bar none, right? People, when they went to the Super Bowl and won the Super Bowl together, people knew they were going to throw the ball to Cooper Kupp. Everyone on the field knew they were going to throw the ball to Kupp. And no one could stop it because it was Stafford and Kupp. Stafford has such good arm strength and such good accuracy, and Cooper Kupp has such good route running and ability, and Sean McVay has such good play calling and scheming. that they could just do whatever they wanted. I mean, Cooper Kupp was just lights out that year. So if they can recreate that, it's a big ask. It's a big if. But if they can recreate that, they got a chance. Like you said, Higbee's still there. Akers is there. I like Evans to possibly get some playing time. Keep an eye out on Puka Nacua. If we get halfway through the season and the Rams are sitting there with one win, it's Stetson Bennett time, baby, because I think that's they're going to cut bait on Stafford. Stafford's going to go right off into the sunset, or maybe he'll keep playing just to try to collect a check. I don't know. But that's my thought process on the Rams. Really a shame if they do continue on a downward trajectory to see a player the caliber of Aaron Donald be on a team like this. It's I would liken it to Felix Hernandez being on the Mariners, but without the fact that Aaron Donald actually got a title.
Right. And in their first 5 games, they have to play the Bengals, the Niners, and the Eagles. So if they happen to beat us in their opening game, if the Seahawks beat them, and I'm betting on the Seahawks at home in their opener, then they're really, in my opinion, their only win in their first 5 games. The chance would be against the Colts. So I see them. They could start the season off as 1-4.
The Colts. And at the Colts, like if Anthony Richardson lights that world on fire, like people are saying from reports I've seen, he's with the first team. He's taking first team reps. They're not doing what I thought they were going to do, which is rely on Gardner early. And they're going straight to Anthony Richardson and they're letting him run the show. If that's the case, and if Jonathan Taylor decides he wants to play football again, I mean, this could be a team that is hard to beat. They got some good receivers in Pittman, on the outside. So, I mean, they're not a pushover, that's for sure. So the Rams,
I think they could be 1-4, or they're really 0-5. That's a possibility.
They could also be 2-3 or 3-2. Right? Any team in the NFL can beat any team on any given day. But I'd say most likely they're 1-4 after the first 5 games.
Yeah. So that's where I have them from a fantasy perspective. Cooper Kupp, their number 1 choice there. I would probably stay away from their defense this year. Cam Akers maybe as like a later round value pick. I just don't know enough about him, and their stuff was always split, and it's just okay. As far as the rest of the offensive players, maybe Tyler Higbee. I don't really have faith in Van Jefferson and Ben Skowronek. I don't even know how to say that.
Both Van Jefferson and Skowronek, they both had good games last year, fantasy wise, but I don't know if there's consistency there. I really don't.
Nah, man. It's not enough. Van had 3 touchdowns last year. It's just not. I don't know. It's just a team I'm not going to really stick with too much this year. Stafford, maybe if he stays healthy, trying to load up at the beginning and not worry about quarterback. He's still Matthew Stafford. He's still a Super Bowl champion and big time vet. Cooper Kupp would be what you there.
If Stafford is healthy, Cooper Kupp's value stays strong. If Stafford gets injured, we'll have to see how Stetson plays. That's how I'm looking at that.
I have them 3rd in the division at the end of the season.
I don't know. We'll see. But the next team on the list is the Arizona Cardinals. The Arizona Cardinals went 4-13 last year, and Cliff Kingsbury was shown the door. So Sean McVay now secures his spot as the best-looking coach in the NFC West. Congratulations, Sean. There was a toss-up there amongst the ladies. Key additions, they brought in Will Hernandez at guard. Harden, Kelvin Beachum at tackle to try and help protect Kyler. They brought in Kazir White, linebacker from Philly. They lost Byron Murphy to Minnesota. That's a tough loss in terms of corners. They got some good rookies. I think they had some pretty good draft picks, and Paris Johnson's a great offensive tackle prospect out of Ohio State. BJ Ojulari, the defensive end, he out of LSU. He's a heck of a player. And then quarterback that a lot of people probably aren't talking about, but Clayton Tune out of I believe it's Tulane. He lit it up for Tulane. Took out USC last year in the bowl game. So something to think about. I think the biggest thing in terms of reports I've seen coming out of Arizona is culture is a factor. And their new head coach, it's like night and day, and it's a culture shock for a lot of these players where they can't just get away with whatever they want anymore. And he's like, hey, no, this is an NFL locker room. This is an NFL organization, and we're going to start acting like it. And so it shows me that there may have been some institutional issues under Kingsbury. Obviously, players staying up past curfew to play Call of Duty was a factor. So I think that the biggest issue right now for the Cardinals is Kyler Murray is injured. So you don't know how long he's going to be out. They don't really have a timetable. So Colt McCoy is your quarterback. I like Colt McCoy. I don't love Colt McCoy. All right. You still got a good running back there, right? And David Connor. So for James Conner, I should say. And James Conner is a solid fantasy running back. And if you want to talk about an unsexy pick, I think he's a top end RB2 because really there's who's the second best running back on the Cardinals. I'll wait. You don't know. So I think by virtue of nobody else is there, he's going to get a lot of touches.
He's going to get a lot of touches.
Yeah. So I think that if you're going to look at anybody on that offense, it's James Conner. Outside of that, they have Marquise Brown. Might take a flyer on him, but you got to look at who's throwing him the football. And like I said, I like Colt McCoy. I don't love him. He's a great backup and a great locker room guy, but I don't know if he can win consistently as the starter, and I don't know how long that Kyler's out. And quite frankly, I don't know how effective Kyler would be in this offense anyway, because if you look at the statistics from last year, when DeAndre Hopkins wasn't on the field, when he was suspended, Kyler's numbers were crap. And then when he came back, all of a sudden things got good for everybody because DeAndre Hopkins was such a force in that offense. So all that being said, Arizona still does have some good pieces on defense. They tend to blitz. They tend to be really aggressive. That might help them against some of the teams like maybe the Niners, or I'm sorry, maybe the Seahawks or the Rams in the division that have had at times issues protecting the quarterback, although I think the Seahawks have less of an issue with that now, but the Rams still certainly might have an issue with it. I think their culture change, and we'll have to wait and see this, but I think the culture change in Arizona is something that probably isn't being talked about enough. And because of that, I think they could actually be a game better than they were last year at 5-12, or they could be a game worse. So I'm giving them like a spectrum, either 3-14 or 5-12. And it really has a lot to do with Kyler Murray's health and how well the team adapts to this new culture. What do you think, Pete?
Yeah, I don't see them making like a big step forward. But at 4 wins last year, how much further back can you go? Like you said, any team could beat any other team on any given day. So I'm hard pressed to give them much more than about 5. If they got to 6 wins, I would be shocked. I'm just looking at their schedule here. I mean, they play Niners, Cowboys, Bengals, Giants. I think those are all losses. I think they lose to the Ravens. I think they the Texans. I think they could beat the Rams, but they play the Eagles and the Steelers. Like, I just don't see a whole lot of winnable games for them. So I think 5 and under is where I have them on the season.
Yeah, and that makes sense entirely. I mean, I think there's a consensus in the NFL that this going into the season, this is the worst team in the league. But I'd like to remind some people that last year going into the season, they thought that the Seahawks, a lot of pundits thought the Seahawks were going to be the worst team in the league. Seahawks made the playoffs. Now, Seahawks were in a little bit different position, but it's still something to consider, right?
Sure. This is all speculation. So.
It's all speculation. It's all conjecture. It's all guessing, folks. So if we, to recap that, we got the Niners winning the NFC West, followed by the Seahawks, then the Rams, and the Cardinals. I'll take that if I'm a Seahawks fan. Back-to-back second-place finishes in the West with Geno Smith at your quarterback. You feel pretty good if you're in that situation. Now I think it's time. I think it's time for it, Pete. It's time for the hot sheet. Hot sheet. It's time for it. How do you want to do this? You want to alternate topics? I don't know if we might have some same topics. We didn't run these by each other. My number one topic to lead off the hot sheet, non-football related. Non-football related, at least not American football. The U.S. women's national team out in the first round of the knockout stage. How big of a disappointment is this to U.S. women's soccer?
Depends on who you ask. And I say depends on who you ask because when you're watching coverage of the World Cup, it's supposed to be about, pride for your country, supporting your country. You're representing the entire country. And a lot of the coverage that I saw from U.S. pundits, especially from former players, I didn't see a whole lot of support. I saw a lot of criticism, and I don't know that it wasn't brought on to themselves. Like the one that I saw that really kind of hit home was the one where they had just tied, and they were on the field dancing and taking pictures and signing autographs and stuff. And you go, why? Where's the celebration exactly?
Yeah.
This doesn't happen. This might be some of these players' last time to play and represent your country. It didn't seem like
definitely was one of them. We know one. Megan Rapinoe came out after their loss and said it was her last game. Yeah,
and I don't. Why do you say this isn't a vacation? The expectation is to win. So
I think this is the perfect example of why coaches like Nick Saban Nick Saban is the premier example of this. Why coaches who can do similar stuff to what Nick Saban has done is so impressive. Okay. The ability for human beings to feel complacency and arrogance. And I'm not saying that's the only reason that they lost, but I watched the advertising campaigns leading up to this, right? With the whole premise of the U.S. women's national team advertising campaign was all the other countries, they had the other countries represented in this hype commercial. Oh, what are we going to do about the U.S.? Oh, no, not them again. Because they've won the last 2 World Cups coming into this year. And to me, it felt like, and all the players were in these commercials, and they're all, coming up, the slow-mo crossing their arms, looking at the camera, all tough like. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, at this point, you don't respect the process, right? Those types of commercials, at least they on face value, appear that you guys just think you're the favorite. You're going to walk in, they're going to hand it to you. You're going to win just by showing up, and that's not the case. and they found out the hard way. You know, the only team they beat in the World Cup was Vietnam, and that was their first appearance, Vietnam's first appearance in the Women's World Cup. That's the only game the U.S. won. They had 2 ties, and they lost in a shootout in the knockout stage, and they had 1 win. So, you know, they were dancing because they were celebrating moving on to the next stage, and that's all well and good. It's something to celebrate. But for a team that's won 2 consecutive World Cups, advancing to the knockout stage shouldn't be a celebration. It should be an expectation. And, you know, that's why they were getting criticism from Carly Lloyd. Carly Lloyd specifically was outspoken about it, and she was criticizing the manager and their strategies and their performance. And she had every right to, because she won both. She was on the team for both those World Cups. She knows what it takes to win them. And so I think this is a blessing in disguise for the U.S. women's soccer team, because now they have redemption motivation, and they have obviously one of the best talent rosters in the world, one of the best systems in the world for producing talent, as we've seen in the last 10 to 15 years. So I don't think this is the end of the U.S. women's national soccer team being very, very good on a global scale, but it certainly is a wake-up call.
Yeah, I agree.
What do you got? What's the first thing you got on yours?
Oh, I was gonna talk about Alvin Kamara's suspension.
Oh, hit me with it.
Alvin Kamara was suspended. So
how many games?
He's out for 3 games, I believe, for his ongoing case. But what this does is create an interesting backfield for the Saints, and brings a little more importance, a little more popularity to one of my favorite players, Jamal Williams. Brings him to the front of the line there. I don't know. Let me see. I guess Kamara's been in the league for a while.
Are you gonna draft Jamal Williams higher because of this?
If I can.
Even though it's just 3 games?
Yes, if I can.
Well, you were already trying to draft Jamal Williams. I was just trying to get a feeling on how much higher. Like, is it a round higher? Is it 2 rounds higher? Is it 3 rounds higher? Like, how big of a difference does this make in his projected value?
He's an RB1 now, and you get him for 3 games, but he's also extremely capable as a backup just in terms of football. So he was touchdown leader last year. Like, he's gonna get a lot of work, especially in the goal line.
Different system.
Sure.
Team.
But they know that he can score. So it's not like you go, well, we know you did really well last year, so we want to do the exact opposite of everything you did. Yeah, I think it makes a team. I don't know. It's just Derek Carr. I don't know.
Is there any part of you that is a little bit biased because you had him on your fantasy team last year and he performed so well?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. I just wanted the people to understand that.
Yeah, I think you should go get him. I think you should way overreach and go get him. If we're talking about fantasy, but suspended for a few games, especially with all the running back drama this year, I don't think this makes or breaks the New Orleans Saints. I don't think this. I think Kamara's obviously a great player, but do you think how many games do you think he's worth? Is he gonna? Are they gonna lose 3 games because he's gone, or is it?
No, I think the Saints went out and got Jamal Williams because they knew this was a possibility. I think that's why they signed him.
Yeah.
Right. I think that it's going to be just fine for the Saints. I don't think that it's going to negatively impact their roster. And I have a feeling that this 3 games, depending on how the legal situation goes, could turn into more. I mean, from my understanding, the legal case has been dismissed, or the guy declined to press charges and then sued him civilly, and they're going to settle it out of court. I think that's what's going to happen. The NFL hit him with 3 games. It is what it is. Alvin Kamara is a great player. I don't know how the dynamic is going to work with Derek Carr, right? Because Jacobs had great years with Derek Carr. Derek Carr has been a great quarterback with 4 fantasy running backs, right? But I think this is probably the best. I mean, he did have Mark Ingram, but that was Sean Payton at the helm, right? Calling plays. So I think this might be the running back that Kamara has had to in the backfield with him that most likely could steal points from him, if that makes sense. I think that Jamal Williams' propensity for being a solid goal line short yardage running back, which is odd to me considering his size. I mean, he's generally a quick running back, right? He's not a big, strong, physical running back. But for whatever reason, he's really good at kind of squirting through those little holes in the line and sniffing out a yard or two to get touchdowns. So
he's just a fun
Kamara,
guy. Just a guy you're rooting for.
From a personality perspective, he's one of my favorite players in the league. He's the what did he refer to himself as? The Hokage for the Hidden Village in Detroit or something. It was in the Hidden Village of the Den. That's what he called it. Yeah, it was incredible. His personality and the vibe he brings to the locker room, I'm sure,
leader of the Hidden Village of
something.
the Den.
Yeah, leader of the Village of the Den. That's right. I loved every second of it. He's a guy's guy. He's a guy I'd like to party with, quite frankly. And I hope he does really well for the Saints. But let that be a lesson to all you NFL players out there or aspiring NFL or college players out there. It's probably not a good idea to go to Vegas and punch some random person in the face after the season. Yeah. It will come back and bite you in the ass.
I read a little article here, and it does say that they have settled. So maybe that.
So it's all locked up. I've got moving on. So in the last couple weeks, the NFL Top 100 has been being released. These are rankings voted on by players, I believe. I don't believe this is sports writers. But there's some controversial rankings in this that I don't really understand, and I wanted to run them by you. Specifically, the quarterback position. There are, in the bottom 50, from 50 to 100, there are 7 NFL quarterbacks, starters, in that grouping. The highest ranked quarterback between 50 and 100 is Dak Prescott at 56. Dak Prescott's rated as the 56th best player in the National Football League. Dak Prescott led the league in interceptions last year. Dak Prescott hasn't done a darn thing in the playoffs since he's been with the Cowboys. Dak Prescott is ranked higher currently in the NFL Top 100 than Jared Goff, former MVP Lamar Jackson, Geno Smith, Tua Tagovailoa, Justin Fields, and the lowest ranked quarterback in the NFL Top 100, Trevor Lawrence. Pete, what do you think about these rankings? Because I, for one, am confused.
The top 100, is that voted on just by peers?
I believe so. I don't know, but it's put out by the NFL.
Okay. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. It's the same reason that Madden has him right next to Jalen Hurts as far as skill.
We had talked about this last week. That's why I wanted to revisit it, because I saw this and I was like, wow, this is insane.
I don't get it, man. I don't get it. You look at the stats. I mean, he's the same quarterback as Kirk Cousins with more interceptions.
Listen, so, I like Jared Goff as much as the next guy, but he's rated ahead of Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson has an MVP.
I don't get it, dude. I
don't like Lamar. To put this in perspective, Lamar Jackson, former MVP, just got a massive contract and re-signed by the Ravens, is rated 72nd in the NFL Top 100. Geno Smith, who had the first good season of his career in, what is this, year 10 for him or something like that, is rated 77th. So that's 5 spots difference if we're keeping track at home. I don't. Great to have respect for Geno.
Is it the market?
What?
Is it just because the Cowboys get so much publicity?
I think it's got to be Cowboys biased, right? That's the only thing I can. Dak's I want to put this in perspective. Dak is not a bad player, okay? But ever since he had that severe ankle injury, he has not been the same. He hasn't. He's putting up too many picks. He doesn't have the mobility that he used to have that helped him escape and make plays on the run. And it shows. He led the league in interceptions last year. And you have him ahead of the biggest one that stands out to me is Lamar Jackson. That seems disrespectful to me. I understand that maybe he's not your traditional style of quarterback, but anybody who's won an MVP in the National Football League and still is relatively young and in their prime deserves to be in the top 50. And you won an MVP. Like other guys that have won the MVP, to put this in perspective, in the last 5 years, I want to say Aaron Rodgers won 2 of them, Patrick Mahomes, Tom Brady. That's it. So I don't get it.
He's on good teams a lot. Like Cowboys were the best fantasy defense last year. So he's on good teams. Maybe there's some press that's he latches onto, but I don't know, man. Like how many playoff wins does he have? Is it 1?
No.
Is it more than 1?
No.
Okay, how many playoff wins?
I think it's 0. I'm pretty sure it's 0.
So
I'm pretty sure we talked about this when the Jets had more playoff wins than the Cowboys in the last 20 years.
He has 2 playoff wins. 2 playoff wins.
I'm shocked. I'm shocked he has 2 playoff wins.
He's played in 4, lost 2.
That's probably the best record for a Cowboys quarterback in the postseason since Troy Aikman. So good for him.
I don't get it. I don't. Is he like the best of the mid-range? Is that what's happening? So
that's what they're saying. But the guys behind him, though, 14th? He's not better than Lamar Jackson. He's not.
Right.
He's not better than Lamar Jackson. Trevor Lawrence is being utterly disrespected in this ranking.
I agree.
96th behind, 10 spots behind Justin Field, 20 spots behind Geno Smith, 30 spots behind Jared Goff. Look, Jared Goff's been to a Super Bowl. A lot of respect for Jared Goff. Trevor Lawrence is just as good as Jared Goff. He may only be going into his 3rd year, but Trevor Lawrence, the leap he made from year 1 to year 2 was insane. And now you're going to give him Calvin Ridley, and you don't think he's going to be a lot better? I mean, and Lamar Jackson, he was top 30. I think he was 32nd last year going into the year, and now he's 72nd. What happened? Did he break his leg?
Yeah.
Like, what are we doing? I don't understand these rankings at all. They really mean nothing. But the fact that Dak was rated that highly,
yeah,
the fact that Dak was rated that highly is to me unbelievable. Unbelievable. Well, what's your next topic? You got another one?
I could save some stuff for next week.
Okay, I got one more. One more that we have to talk about. We have to. Listen, I know that we focus predominantly on the National Football League here, but college football season's coming up. We're going to be doing some college football shows, and this week college football had a seismic shift in the way that it works. The Pac-12 is essentially no more. The only 4 remaining teams in the Pac-12 are Stanford, Cal, Oregon State, and Washington State, our alma mater. Everyone else has gone to either the Big Ten or the Big 12. And it's a new era. It's a new environment. And as a fan, it's not my favorite thing in the world. As a analyst, a amateur professional analyst, it's intriguing as all get out, because the matchups that we're going to see, not this year. This year we got one last year to run it back, but next year, starting next year, the matchups and schedules that we're going to see when we have Ohio State going to Washington week 2 for their Big Ten opener, or Oregon going to Rutgers in week 6. I mean, these type of games that we've never seen in the regular season before are going to become commonplace, and it's going to be great content. It's going to be great matchups, but there's some sadness on the flip side of that, because that regionality, like Oregon versus Oregon State, might not happen anymore. Washington versus Washington State might not happen anymore. You know, that those kind of matchups from a regional perspective, it's sad. You know, it's sad because so many of us have grown up with that, and you know, we've been doing it the same way for about 100 years. The Pac-12 has been around a long time. I know it was the Pac-8 back in the day, but it's been around a long time. And so, for all intents and purposes, the Pac-12 is dead. It's now a Power 4 instead of a Power 5, and it's gonna be interesting to see what happens. Pete, got any thoughts on that?
Going to be something we're not used to, right? And it's going to be the new norm. So there's going to be this, you know, immediate reel of like shock and anger and upset feelings, but then it's something we're going to get used to. What I don't appreciate, it's like, why even have conferences if you're going to have this many teams inside? All the conferences eventually are going to cannibalize each other, or you're just going to end up with like 5 total or something, because what's even the point? And then recruiting is going to become extremely difficult. So I mean, it's fine if you're a team that's already popular, right? Like, you're still going to be popular. You're still going to be hard to beat. All the SEC schools will be fine. It's a bummer for the regionality thing. I always thought it was cool to play teams next to you. That's what builds rivalries. It makes it easier for fans to travel, typically. So, you know, if you want to see your team, you know, if I'm a USC fan, now I got to go to Wisconsin. I don't want to go to Wisconsin unless it's a bowl game.
Are you gonna even like? That's a thing, right? Like, there was an aspect of regionality where your fan base on a Friday night or Saturday morning, you got a night game on the road. They put up and drive 5 hours to get to you.
You could get there. You could drive out and get to them. You could take a short plane ride from Washington to California.
Yeah. You can't. Most people aren't buying a plane ticket to go from Oregon to New Jersey on a right. weekend in October, right. And they got to get back at work on Monday. That's not going to happen. How
many fans do you think are going to travel for stuff like that? You know,
I think it's going to be severely diminished.
Yeah, exactly. So,
and then there's talks. We might not be done yet. There's been talks of Florida State and Clemson also joining the Big Ten. I mean, now you got teams as far away as Tallahassee, Florida, and Seattle, Washington in the same conference as one another.
What's the point of having a conference then?
It's the NFL model at that point. And that's the frustrating thing, is this whole concept of student athlete. There's been a lot of talk about it with the NIL deals coming out, and they're like, oh, there's no such things as student athletes anymore. These guys are getting paid to play. Yeah, but you still got an opportunity to get a degree. Like, education is still part of it. But if there are guys on that team who aren't going to play in the NFL, who are in challenging majors, right, where they need to be present and need to study and they need to be available for tests, if you're having to travel across the country on a weekly basis, potentially, multiple times a year, it's hard for NFL athletes to do that, let alone kids who have classes to go to. Yeah. So
you're flying out Friday or Thursday, you're practicing, you're playing, you're acclimating, and fly back Sunday. So you're doing your homework, midnight, Sunday night?
On the plane?
So you're like for your 7 a.m. test on Monday.
Yeah, I know. Like, can you imagine? Like, that's crazy, and And so it's good. Like I said, purely from a football perspective, like the two teams playing each other, do I want to see USC take on Wisconsin more regularly, or Ohio State have to play Oregon or Washington on a regular basis? Yeah, that's a great matchup. I want to see that, of course. But from these kids' perspectives, it's potentially deterring them from or harming their ability to get an education. I think what's going to probably end up happening is they're going to have to restructure how football players go to classes. Instead of having the summer off, it'll be you have your spring semester and your summer semester, and then you're off in the fall. Like that's
that's what I was gonna say. Do you just not go to classes football season, and do you just play during the summer? So you're committed.
I don't know how the NCAA is going to regulate that, right? Because the NCAA regulates like if you're qualified for, playing based on your academic performance. So, or does it even matter anymore? Like, do they even care? So it's interesting. I've been a proponent of players getting paid, right? I want players to get paid if they've earned it with their performance on and off the field. But this realignment is tough as a selfish take, as a Washington State University fan. It's sad because I know that my university most likely won't be able to recover from this in terms of athletics. I don't think we'll ever be able to recreate the success that we've had in terms of a financial level and on a national level that the Cougars have had, especially under Coach Mike Leach when he was there, and some of the great moments we had with College Game Day and the different bowl games that we went to and Gardner Minshew and so on and so forth. That's kind of heart-wrenching, but from a big time college football standpoint and seeing the best teams match up against each other, that's going to be fun to watch. I don't know how they're going to balance all this out. That's for these conferences to decide, but they're definitely looking at it from a TV dollar perspective, and that's it. And I think one of the reasons this has happened, and I don't know if we've touched on this, is a lot of these large programs and institutions relied heavily on booster money to run their programs, right? They get hundreds of thousands of dollars, millions of dollars every year in booster donations. And what has happened, and what that does is that pays salaries, staff salaries, right? That pays facility upgrades. It pays for all these different luxuries that these staffs have, and actually fueled coaches in college football getting paid these exorbitant salaries at state schools. That's because the funding came from donors in a lot of cases. With that being said, that money from alumni is now being funneled to the players in these NIL deals and these NIL groups that are being formed at each of these universities. And so I think what's happening is a lot of these universities are seeing decreased donations to the university itself because there's been more donations towards the NIL thing to try and get better players. And because of that, then these universities have reprioritized their needs to go after the largest dollar amounts in TV deals, which is the other big pot of money out there. And now we see what's happened. I think that's what it is. I think that's the state we're in. I don't know if it's going to correct itself, if at all, anytime soon. And so this is the world we need to get used to for college athletics. I know this is a long show, but I felt it was important to at least touch base on this, especially with considering it's so fresh. It happened this week. So.
Well, we'll see how. I mean, the next 5 years or so, we're going to see a lot of major changes to college football. We've already seen a ton, especially with transfer portal stuff and NIL deals. It's becoming more. It's becoming less college and just more of its own thing. It's just. I I don't know, man. There's some, for lack of a better word, some like, it's like less, I don't know, like it's just less collegey. It's less.
Yeah, it's professionalized sports.
Yeah, it's becoming less for your school and more for like what deal can I get, and it doesn't matter where I play. I'm going to play at 4 different schools in 4 years.
Yeah,
and to me as a fan, and especially like being lucky enough to go to a college and support a team and watching mostly downs, but some ups
made the ups that much sweeter, baby.
Yeah, and it's like it takes away from the what's the word I'm trying to think of? Not whimsy, but like magic, I guess.
Purity.
Yeah, it's like
the pureness, the aura of the game.
Yeah,
it takes away from that aura that just. Yeah, I get what you're saying. It's the mystical nature. It's like, look at this entity that's been doing this for 100 years. That's just the spectacle, right? The pageantry.
Yeah,
the spectacle and the pageantry of college football on Saturdays on these campuses across the nation. It's unlike anything else. And that's still going to be there. Don't get me wrong. People are still going to love college football. But for certain institutions, certain universities, it's going to be a lot harder. And unfortunately for us, specifically, our university got left on the outside looking in. Last thing before we go, Pete. Browns-Jets Hall of Fame game. Any thoughts?
The lights went out. You know, we can't get a functioning stadium for the Hall of Fame game.
If the Niners were playing, it would have made sense, right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of their MO. A little dig there on the Niners. We were so nice to them today. Had to get one in there.
I thought the Browns backup guy, was he from UCLA? What's his name?
Yeah. Dorian Thompson-Robinson.
He was fun to watch. That was cool. I watched a lot of his highlights. That was very fun to watch. Zach Wilson was Zach Wilson. That's you know,
he had good moments.
Yeah, he had a nice deep ball. I don't know, man.
A play called by Aaron Rodgers, by the way, came out after the game. Aaron Rodgers called the play. Zach Wilson makes the throw. Everybody goes, "Oh, that's crazy! What a great play by Zach Wilson!" After the game, we find out, oh, that was Aaron. Aaron told him who to throw to and what play to run.
Yeah, I'm just excited football's on TV again.
Oh yeah,
preseason's. I like the direction that preseason football has gone. Versus like getting your starters warmed up to now like testing everyone, all your backups to see who's going to make the team. I like that direction a lot more. But it's just getting me excited. I don't have much to say about it. Did the Browns win? I think they won.
The Browns did win.
Yeah. And
there were some TV show hosts out there that were saying, you know, the question was posed on multiple news outlets. Was this a must-win game for the Jets? Quite frankly, it's the first preseason game, and Aaron Rodgers didn't even play in it. Shut up. Everyone shut up.
A must-win game.
It's a preseason game,
It's
folks.
practice.
Relax.
It's a joint practice.
There were guys out there trying to drum up confrontation by saying, yes, it was must-win. This is catastrophic for the Jets. If they want to make a run at the Super Bowl, they couldn't lose this game. Are you kidding me?
Please send me their ads so I can block them. Everyone's a coach. As soon as the season starts, everyone's an expert. We're all under the table advisors to those teams.
At least we've been experts for 10 weeks prior. Okay, at least we started early.
Truth is, 99% of us don't know anything about anything, and we're just guessing out here and just regurgitating what we read on some other websites. So that's.
You know what I do know? I'm freaking excited for football. That's what I do know. I'm excited. I feel my blood pumping, right? The hair on the back of my neck starting to stand up on attention. Starting to get that heart flutter. I know that might be the cholesterol, but getting that heart flutter, you know, getting excited.
Painful or like excited?
No, we're okay for now. Wait. No, we're good. The point that I'm making is we're less than a month away from football. There's football already happened. There's going to be more preseason games this month. We are 3 weeks away from college football. And I tell you what, I don't know if I could be more excited. I'm gonna get more excited the closer we get to real live. Every week we got freaking 20 games to watch. It's time to re-up your YouTube subscriptions, your YouTube Live subscriptions. It's time to upgrade your Hulu subscriptions. It's time to get your DirecTV deposit down because you got to cancel it at the end of the year if you can, because you only really need it during football season, folks. Get in there. Get ready. Start training if you haven't already, right? We're talking curls, so you can get the beer to your mouth without your arm getting agitated throughout the game. We're talking about doing some stair climbs. Not everybody can afford tickets near the field. Sometimes you got to have the intestinal fortitude and the belief to hike your way up to the top of the bleachers. Lord knows I will have to. And make sure you get your recipes fine-tuned for your pre-games, for your tailgates, for your watch parties. All right, you don't want to be coming out there with some subpar beanie weenies, okay? You got to come out there with the good stuff. Bring the juice. Don't embarrass yourself. The separation's in the preparation. Let's get out there. Let's get after it. And let's get ready to have a great 2023 football season. That's what I'm talking about.
And that on that note, we'll go ahead and wrap this thing up. Episode 10 of the Ball Bag, bit of a longer episode, but a lot of exciting things coming out. And we had the pleasure of having Kyle on, so a real, expert on the show. And we appreciate him. Go ahead.
Easily the most professional person we've had on the show. One of the most knowledgeable guys I've talked to, especially specific to one team. Hats off to that guy. Appreciate him being on the show.
Please go follow him. Go over to his socials, KyleAMadson, for the Niners Wire, I believe.
Yeah, even if you're the Candlestick Chronicles is his podcast. Make sure you go find that on everything that has podcasts and give that a listen. I mean, if nothing else, even if you're not a San Francisco 49ers fan, if your team's going up to play them this week and you want to get to know the enemy, so there's a guy that can help you out with that. So very, very excited that he was willing to come on and talk with us for a little bit there. And I think we'd had a pretty good show there, Pete.
I agree. That's a good number 10, and we might chop this up and release some of the segments individually as well. But yeah, episode 10, NFC West preview, and we will catch you guys on the next